Part 2. What's that going to be on? Interceptors. Part of a, if you're just jumping in now, it's part of a series, kind of short videos I'm doing, helping to explain the different types of fighter aircraft, and hopefully that'll help you as a writer or designer, basically more accurately represent what's going, what to do in your games or books or whatever you're doing. Interceptors. What's an interceptor? Well, it's about basically an extended range aircraft, typically flies at high altitude at an incredible speed. It's got limited detectability in terms of basically it's supposed to penetrate really fast, decent payload, and its main armament is usually long-range guided missiles. Shoot and scoot. As for doctrine, it's all about the speed. Drop tanks for linger time, and then when there's basically enemy aircraft are detected by long-range radar, either your own or more likely either an AWACS or some sort of major ground-based system, you drop the tanks and you book it. And you get basically towards whatever that enemy air presence is. You go high, you go fast, and when you basically get yourself in range with your long-range missiles, and you launch them. Basically, you hit light fighters, recon aircraft, air superiority fighters that have lingered and have come to basically try to draw out your other aircraft, and particularly bombers. How do you stop a bomber from getting overhead or getting within cruise missile range? Well, you get there really fast with an interceptor, and you have a decent enough payload to take it down. That's what an interceptor's job is. It's a very important role that I think it's overlooked often. Interceptors aren't typically super maneuverable. They don't have to be. Sometimes their maneuverability is good, but it's not as necessary as it is for something like an air superiority fighter or even a multi-role aircraft. Basically, you're all about acceleration, speed, being able to change your vector, get in fast, deliver your weapons fast, and get the hell out fast. That and over a long range. That's what an interceptor's job is. Examples of an interceptor. Basically, there are a couple we've had historically attempted, but the U.S. has not really been great with interceptors basically since the late Cold War. The F-4 Phantom II, that is designed like an interceptor. It's designed like an Air Force interceptor, and as of that, it's decent. You know, it's got big-ass engines. It's got an okay payload. It could carry, the long-range fancy stuff, and it was fast. It wasn't super maneuverable, but it was fast. And it suffered in part, particularly towards the end of the design phase. They did things like tried to shoehorn it into a multi-role type, basically a multi-role job. It's not really designed to do. I mean, it can do that because it's a great airplane, but it's really not designed to do that. They tried to make it an air superiority fighter for the Navy. It's not really designed for that. There were doctrine that they changed. They did figure out how to actually use it really effectively, particularly towards the end of Vietnam. But it's an interceptor. Basically, it's two massive jet engines, little stubby wings, nice and narrow, two pilots, one to manage the weapons, one to manage basically not crashing into the ground, and you haul ass. As for Russian bombers dealing with F-4s, that was a nightmare. That's why they were cheap, and we had so freaking many of them. They were a problem for basically Russian aircraft penetrating our airspace. In that sense, it was a good airplane. In the sense of the service it was pressed into to do a bunch of different things, not so good. They thought about replacing it with an air-to-air variant of the F-111F. That's the or the F-111, I should say. That's the Aardvark. That was a government disaster of a design process, which ended up with actually a decent aircraft, but it was basically the precursor to what we saw was going to happen in terms of bureaucratically with the F-35. The F-111, not an air superiority fighter. But as an interceptor, basically this big fat thing with slope wings that would take off from any kind of airfield, have a lot of fuel and a lot of weapons, and then just rocket towards the enemy, probably wouldn't have been too bad. They never adopted it. In fact, they were looking into turning the B-1B into the B-1R. Basically, you carry missiles, and missiles don't weigh nearly as much as the bomb payload, so you can lighten the aircraft up. It's got those massive engines. And the swept wings, so it's kind of like a gigantic F-111 in a lot of ways. and basically have enough sensors on it where it can just rocket to anywhere in the battlefield really low and really damn fast, and then fire its missiles and then get the hell out, or really high and really damn fast, fire its missiles, get the hell out. We didn't do that either. So we had the YF-12 for a little bit. That was basically the precursor to the A-12 was the precursor to the SR-71. It was smaller, it was lighter, it was faster, it had more properties of an interceptor than basically the recon plane, which the SR-71 was. The CIA liked it, the Air Force looked into it, and they decided basically, what do we need high altitude, super fast interceptors for? Big issue with the YF-12 would be the linger time, basically. You'd have to take off from an airfield in order to do your operation. It wasn't going to basically fly up in the air unless you had them constantly rotating, which wouldn't have been a bad idea either. But YF-12, really cool in theory, really cool in concept, never basically made it to production. Payload was also an issue. Rumors of the F-19. Did that exist? I mean, there's record of it being used over Afghanistan. There's satellite images of stuff in a boneyard that looks like basically, looks like it probably was this weird aircraft that's called the F-19. That was apparently basically a stealth interceptor. Really fast, relatively, I don't say light, but like its payload wasn't huge. And basically, the idea was you move in really quick and you're unseen and you deliver your missiles and you just all of a sudden bombers or fighters or whatever they held, the enemy air formation is dropping, and then they don't know what's going on, and then you're out of there. That we never mass adopted that. So whether that actually was a real plane or just is basically misinformation that we put out, we never had an interceptor. Now the Russians, basically, they took the MiG-25, which was pretty damn, I mean, that's a really damn fast aircraft. That's one where they were trying to design an air superiority fighter, and they pretty much created a decent interceptor. It was the response to the F-4, only it was better in some ways and worse in other ways. So particularly in cost and maintenance survivability, the F-4 is a little better. But then the Russians came out with the MiG-31. The MiG-31 Foxhound. That's a serious threat. That's a serious aircraft. It's big, it's ridiculously fast, it's got a really good payload, it's got top-of-the-line Russian sensors on it. It's a good aircraft. It really is. And we actually do not have a response to it. We have retired the F-4, which wasn't really, I mean, it was, you could send them against MiG-31s, but you were at a disadvantage. But basically, we don't have an interceptor. Russians got the MiG-31. Granted, they don't have a whole huge amount of them, but we don't have a response to that. We need a response to that. I strongly feel we need an interceptor aircraft in the inventory. Now, there's a couple different things people have talked about doing. Basically, picking up that B-1R concept and having that be, in place of an interceptor, basically a giant weapons platform that fires like 100 air-to-air missiles, and you use it in coordination with the air-to-ground stuff. Okay, that's not a bad... I don't think that's a bad supplement. I don't think it fully replaces an interceptor, but maybe we could do that. What do I think we should do, or what we should have done? The F-23. The F-23 Black Widow was the competitor by, I think it was Northrop and Boeing. Basically, it was the competitor to the F-22. It went to the trials. A couple things about it. It was lighter. It was a little stealthier, and it was way faster than the F-22. In fact, its speed's actually classified. And this is with old school 90s engines, right? The F-22 could supercruise without actually initiating afterburner, which was a first, which makes it a very fast, very efficient aircraft. The F-23 was faster out of the gate. It was faster. Now, for me, I see this development of the F-23, and I say, wow, this aircraft's amazing, and we don't have an interceptor. We probably should have adopted both. Basically, a bigger order of F-22s, but having F-23s on standby, particularly in places like Alaska and for NORAD and Florida, basically the air defense grid, F-23s would have been a very, very, very good solution to the fact that we don't have basically an interceptor. I mean, we had the F-4 still serviced at that time, but it was obsolete. It was obsolete by basically mid-90s, The Iranians use it. It's a joke. It's not. It was well past its time. It served well. A lot of the pilots who flew it really liked it, but it was shoehorned into roles it shouldn't have been shoehorned into, and it suffered, its career as an interceptor suffered. They tried to make it a seed aircraft. It was a little more successful as that. I think that was actually the last variant. The G is the last variant they retired. And again, because it's a big old plane, and it's pretty damn quick. So, seed aircraft isn't doing super maneuvering or anything. So it did okay with that in that role. But we don't have a replacement for it, and we had a really good replacement in the F-23, and we didn't buy it. So now, do we develop a new platform? Do we go back and say, hey, what was good about that F-23? Can we have an F-23 2020 update? Like maybe I know it's a 30-year-old plan, but aerodynamics don't change. Maybe the materials change. Maybe there's something else. Maybe this SR-73 they're working on might actually have some sort of I don't know. Maybe interceptors are actually better to be space-based. Basically, you have it up top, and you have guys in an orbital platform, and basically when the bells go off and you have to launch, it drops down into the atmosphere. It's moving, close to hypersonic speed, does its interception, goes back up, gets collected. I don't know. Maybe the future of interceptors is in space or something. Maybe there's something different to it. Maybe UAVs might do a better job as interceptors, basically a missile with missiles strapped to it. I don't know. But I am concerned that we don't have one, and the Russians have a fantastic one. So, that's an interceptor. It's fast, long range, and it's basically designed to deter attacks. So, interceptor.